Please welcome to the stage me, host and editor of One Big Thing, Niala Boodhoo. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. We are so excited to be with you all here in Baton Rouge, looking at how Louisiana is building up a cleaner energy infrastructure. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our first speaker this morning. She's the president and CEO of the Center for Planning Excellence, Camille Manning-Broome. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us this morning. So we did a similar event to this last week in Richmond, also talking about communities and infrastructure and clean energy. And one of the things that struck me in that conversation is when we are talking about collaboration and partners, you need to see if people are all collaborating with the same goals. So I thought we should start with that. When you think about the Center for Planning Excellence, if you can just share with us just sort of what your goals are, what your vision is when it comes to a green economy.
Yeah, what's most exciting right now is people are all coalescing around the future of clean energy. And it can have transformational impacts on our economy and on our energy infrastructure, which ultimately get to people and meeting people's needs. And so I think what we're really excited about is bringing people around the table to have conversations about what our future energy economy looks like and how it better meets the needs of people. We're doing that through providing long-term planning support and policy tools specifically around renewable energy as our focus. How can solar development look quite differently and people share in the production and the ownership of those systems through microgrids, community scale solar and things like that, as well as we're really bringing people around together around offshore wind, leaders from all states, and there's so many different entities that are setting the table and having this conversation. So it's an exciting time to be in Louisiana, but I think what's most important is that the ways in which we've done everything in the past has to shift. We have not done a great job of building a resilient, co-owned, reliable energy infrastructure, and what are the future sources of energy.
So when you think about building that new infrastructure, you talked about wind and solar. What are your biggest concerns with, to your point, sort of not like involving everyone, making sure that everyone is sharing in this opportunity, that there is also economic opportunity for everyone, and that this is done in an equitable manner when it comes to wind and solar?
Yeah, so both although they are not nascent industries globally or even nationally, they are in Louisiana. And so we see a lot of community response around objecting to things, because most of which is what we learn about is because of past actions of not decommissioning oil and gas wells or things that we've done in the past. And so we have conducted solar workshops. We developed a model solar toolkit to provide local governments and communities all the policy tools needed to make sure that when solar energy investment comes into the community can maintain its character, community has a voice at the table, and local governments have the tools in place to make sure that everybody's a good neighbor to one another. So we've done that across the state. We've brought together over 500 people so far. 3 parishes have already adopted our solar toolkit. These are ordinances that haven't been in place, and our communities need those resources.
When you mention those ordinances that aren't in place, what to your mind are the most important things here for creating what you're talking about?
Yeah, what we hear is a lot around buffers and fencing and ways in which, if you can imagine a lot of rural land all of a sudden is not going to be rural, and it's going to have solar panels on it. And so people are wondering, what are the impacts of that, and how, and if communities aren't sharing in the production, so they don't see an immediate, if you're talking about utility scale solar, for example, benefit. And so that's why we're also educating people on the benefits of residential solar, community scale solar, and microgrids. And there are some state level policies that need to shift around community solar in particular, but New Orleans is doing a great job in demonstrating what that can look like. So if you think about energy burden, the average American pays around 3% of their income on electricity. In Louisiana, we have the highest electric sector usage at the household level. In New Orleans, half of the LMI individuals, it was found, are paying 9.8% of their income on energy costs.
And that's for lower middle income.
It's for lower middle income. And there are, it was found there are about 150,000 homes in Louisiana that are paying up to 23% of their income on energy costs. And so, Louisiana is a state where we have a high LMI. It's 52% of the population is considered low to moderate income. And so when we think about our infrastructure and we think about our future energy, how are we going to meet everyone's needs? How are we going to specifically help our LMI households? And those are our workers. Those are the people that make up our population and our community, and we've got to focus there.
So Camille, we've been talking about different stakeholders, essentially.
Yeah.
You've been talking about the community. You mentioned state laws that need to change. You all are doing work with state lawmakers through your Power Up initiative. Yeah. How have you been working with state lawmakers to introduce them to some of these things that we've just been talking about?
Thank you. Yes. The Power Up initiative is designed to facilitate peer-to-peer learning exchange and really also helping with planning and policy. And so last year we took a delegation of legislators and key stakeholders to Rhode Island to see the Block Island wind farm. And seeing is believing. The wind sector in particular has so much opportunity in Louisiana because 80% of the oil and gas jobs, those are transferable skills. And so it's expected to have a 25% increase in entrepreneurs and economic jobs just until 2030. So we went to Rhode Island, and what was fascinating to see, the yellow jackets holding up the pilings, they were constructed and manufactured in South Louisiana. It was Representative Ogeron, who is here, who was part of the build out of Block Island offshore wind farm. It was Europeans and Louisiana companies coming together to figure out and build this development. So we went there, then we took the same cohort to Avondale Global Gateway to see all the manufacturing and staging areas already being put together for offshore wind sector. And then this year we have a large group going to Germany to see the North Sea and learn about port infrastructure build out, how our communities can really capitalize and have a rebirth in some areas around this infrastructure build out.
What do you feel like you have learned from the lawmakers as you all have been doing these trips together?
That they need very direct and accurate information. There's a lot of myths that we hear them all the time around markets and what's happening, and really they're looking for good talking points and understanding on what is happening, but then also examples of policies that have been done elsewhere, which is another thing that we're researching and putting up front in our Power Up initiative.
And so you mentioned state policies that you'd like to see enacted. Can you give me a sort of your top three of what you'd like to see in this sector?
Oh, goodness. Well, one, I think more market signals demonstrating investment into our infrastructure. Sometimes we hear, oh, the private market is what spurs everything. No, it's by moves from the public sector that really can invigorate and drive the market. And so I think some investment that we would like to see in our ports and infrastructure. I also, at our Public Service Commission, which regulates our utilities, really opening it up so that we can have community scale solar across the state, which is now only available in New Orleans. And so there are some bigger policy needs.
So we've been talking about state politics. I want to ask you about what you think about a possible party change in the fall in Washington, both either in the executive branch or in Congress, and how you think that might affect things here or the relationships that you've been building.
Yeah. The state has already brought in around close to 750 million just for solar microgrids and that energy sector. We also know that offshore wind is not going anywhere. I have heard, what's going to happen in the fall? Well, the states north of us, everyone's moving forward. You've got Europeans, you've got Asia. I mean, everyone is moving towards offshore wind. So even if something happens in the Gulf, we can still command the domestic supply chain here in Louisiana. A recent report from Pew found that there are already 450 companies in Louisiana that have the potential to shift or are part of the offshore wind sector or could have the potential to shift. And so I think about us using our construction, our manufacturing, our workforce to build an energy sector that is not going to change in the fall. It's going to be somewhere.
Camille, as we've been talking about all of this, Louisiana's image is oil and gas, right? Like that's what people associate with this state. What do you want people to think of when they think about energy in Louisiana?
Oh, I want them to think about clean energy, all of the above. I mean, oil and gas has been on the decline in Louisiana for many, many years. And so we still need natural gas, and that's going to be a factor, but I mean, I think all of the above. We're providing. You don't want all your eggs in one basket, and so we've got a diverse economic portfolio. But I think my vision is that in that energy development and in that infrastructure, it benefits people, not just private companies.
You mentioned one last thing I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned that you think. For workers who are in oil and gas, that 80% of those people have transferable skills. What about the other 20%? What would you like to see happen there?
There's a lot of activity happening around workforce training and development. There are also other, our largest employers in the state are around healthcare and the universities and government. And so, I mean, tourism is also on the rise. Solar energy. When we have a major manufacturing, $1 billion investment in manufacturing of solar panels that happened in Iberia Parish. We've just received the Solar for All award, so that's $156 million coming in for rooftop solar. That can create quite a demand and a whole other sector that we, haven't been thinking of. Utility scale solar doesn't produce as many jobs, but when you start having a demand for residential, that's when the market can really grow in all sorts of sectors. And so I think being open and realizing that cleaning the environment and addressing climate change could be our biggest job potential. And so we just have to think differently and more creatively and with a higher sense of urgency, because humans have never met the scale of the climate process in human history. And so our brains don't even know how to jump that quickly to make the kinds of changes that are needed. So I'm hoping that we can bring people together, work with community, work with industry, work with academics, work with government to have a vision and it'd be bold and something that we can all get around.
Well, I'm afraid we're out of time.
Yes,
Thank you so much
agreed.
for sharing a little bit of that vision with
Yeah.
us this morning. Camille Manning-Broome, President and CEO of the Center for Planning Excellence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyla. Okay.